what's up? My name is Meaghan and welcome back to Book Talk with Meg. Today I'm here with my recent reads, I believe, number 4, and basically this is also the wrap up for my first week of June / basically the books I read in Mexico. I don't know why it was so complicated for me to say that, but we'll just roll with it. If you guys haven't seen my June TBR for the first week, I'll link it up in the cards. I also have a giveaway going on, so you guys can see what portion of these books I actually read and what I kind of failed to do, even though I did read like 7 or 8 books in 1 week. So I call it success. So without further ado, we'll hop on in. I'll talk about the books I read on my Kindle first, and then we can move on and discuss my physical books. The first book I read on my trip and the first book I read on my Kindle was The Test by Sylvain Neuvel, which is a novella. It's an adult novella, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I adored it. Basically, the premise of that novel is that we follow our main character that comes from Iran, I believe, and he is taking the citizenship test for the UK. I believe he's trying to become a British citizen. And basically it follows his journey through that test. This book explores a lot of the psychological elements in our behavior, what it means to be a citizen and to fit in a group of people. It also explores the different choices we make, how we rationalize the choices we make. It talks about sexism, racism. It also talks about what we consider a hero in our society and how different standards will apply in this test and how we each kind of have our own interpretation of facts and of people. It was very interesting, a lot more disgusting than I expected it to be. It's like very scary and also very, like, I wouldn't want to be in the situation the character is in. I don't want to spoil anything, but it was very shocking is probably the word I would be looking for, but nonetheless I think it was a great reflection of society, the standards we hold up to and what it means to belong to a group of people. I, for one, like to study crime and criminology and the study of people and our behaviors, so for me it was a very interesting read. It was so well done, and honestly I recommend it to everyone. There are a few trigger warnings which you guys should look up on Goodreads if you're interested, but I love that one. And the other book I read on my Kindle during my time was 99% Mine by Sally Thorne, which is an adult romance, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Obviously this is kind of the opposite of what the test is. It's very light and fluffy. Basically 99% Mine follows our main character Darcy, who is kind of like a world traveler, but she also travels to run away from any feelings and problems she has, and she's now working in a bar when the story unfolds, and she's kind of like a very tough character. She won't take anybody's shit, and she doesn't let the alpha males get to her, which she was such a different character from a lot of the other characters I've read about, which is one of the reasons I adored the book so much. I've heard a lot of people say that that was kind of like why they didn't enjoy the book as much as they did. But I absolutely adored Darcy. She was very refreshing. She's very open and honest and almost kind of bitchy, but in a way that like you clearly see she's protecting herself, and she also has a lot of ambition. I just like reading about her because she's so different than I am, so it's really fun once in a while to just be in someone else's shoes, and that's what I love about reading. And I also adored the main character's love interest, Tom. Basically the entire story follows Darcy, and Darcy's grandmother had this home, and in her will she had it that it had to be renovated and sold, and Tom, who was Darcy's childhood best friend, was put on this project, and basically Darcy has had a crush on him forever and decides to stay and help assist in the renovation and selling of the house, and it's their story, and I just really loved it. Tom was such a great main love interest. He's very kind, he's charismatic, he's funny, he's very, very, very caring, and I just think he was such a good role model for men, in the sense that like he wasn't trashy, he wasn't a bad boy depiction, and I for once found that very refreshing. So overall I really adored that book. Now moving on to the stacks of books that I have with me physically, the first one on the pile is Serious Moonlight by Jen Bennett, which I also gave 4 out of 5 stars to. This is a YA contemporary novel, and it follows our main character Birdie. Birdie is a very big fan of mystery novels and solving mysteries. She has lost her mother and is now living with her grandfather, and she kind of has this aunt who is her mother's friend who kind of watches over Birdie, and the entire story takes off when Birdie starts working the graveyard shift, so basically the overnight shift at this hotel, and she meets this boy who she has had an encounter with before, and together they try to solve a hotel mystery that's happening with a mysterious author. I adored this book so much. This is my first I can't say her name. This is my first Jen Bennett book, and certainly not my last. I really adored the writing style. It flows very nicely. You start to care about all the characters so quickly, and the intrigue and the mystery really kept me reading. The romance was absolutely glorious. I loved the main interest in here. He's called Daniel, and he's the cutest little pumpkin, and I just think the characters fit well together. It wasn't a forced relationship in the sense that it evolved at a quiet pace. It wasn't all of a sudden. It was kind of slow burn in a sense, and I really appreciated that. I found that the mystery in this book was so well done, and I think Birdie was one of the most interesting characters I've read about in a really long time. She is very special in the sense that her family is very different from anything I've read before. Her direction, her self-consciousness, her train of thoughts were so interesting, and I loved being in her head. I think her moral standards were very great, and just the overall character arc she had was so fun to read about. I think that everything in this book was very healthy, and I love the dynamics between the family members and the love interest and our main character Birdie. I just think this book is very special. I didn't give it 5 out of 5 stars just because this wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but I think it could definitely be a lot of people's new favorite, so I highly recommend this one. The next book I have is Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. This was one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and I'm glad to say it didn't disappoint. Again, this book I'm thinking either between a 4 and a 5, so maybe we'll settle at a 4.5 for this one. This follows our main character, Rosa Santos, and she is a young girl. I don't remember her age. I don't know if she's like 16 or 18. She's like in the college age in the US, which I'm not really sure what age that is, but whatever. And she lives in Florida, and basically the entire story revolves around Rosa and her family and her cultural heritage. Rosa is a Latino main character. She has a Cuban heritage, and it follows her and her family curse. Basically, Rosa's family, specifically the women in her family, have been cursed in the sense that they cannot date men with boats because the men disappear and die and only the boats remain. And this is Rosa struggling with her identity as being a Latino girl, never have been to Cuba, the homeland, and her family being very resistant about talking about Cuba. It's her falling in love with a boy with a boat, and just a lot of different things. This book really packed a punch, a lot more than I expected it to. This is very intricate, and it has a very fun balance between something that's more emotional and something that's more light and fluffy. By the cover of this book, you'd think it was just a summer romance, but there's so much more to it. There's political discussions about Cuba and what it means to identify with a certain culture. Rosa doesn't feel she deserves to call herself Latino or Cuban, because she's never been to Cuba and she doesn't know about Cuba as much as she wished she could. And it's kind of hard on her, and she's making her entire school decisions based on the fact that like there's study programs in Havana, and she's struggling to talk with her family about it because obviously they're so reluctant to talk about Cuba. And I just found this book to be so interesting and so different from a lot of things I've read in the YA spectrum. I just think it hits a punch, and I always love discovering new cultures and cultural identities and what it means to struggle, what it means to be part of more than one cultural background. I'm not part of that, and sometimes I feel like books can be such a great tool to communicate these feelings and to help me relate to the people and kind of be able to put myself in other people's shoes, and this book was great for that. This was a debut novel, I believe, and it was so well done. Highly recommend this book, and for the Latino rep, I found that it was like the best part of it, and the romance was also The next book I read was Boys South of Mason-Dixon by Abby Glines. This is a new adult romance, and it is nothing like the previous books I've talked about because there is nothing deep about this book. Honestly, it's just drama, but I ate it up, and I just love Abby Glines, and I love her new adult content. This follows our main character, and I'm blanking on her name. What is her name? Dixie. Her name is Dixie, and she lives in this small town, and it is a very country vibe book, and it's about her, and ever since she's been a younger child, she's really loved this boy named Asher, who was her next boy neighbor, and he has 4 brothers, and basically she's just been in love with him because he's the only boy who's cared about her and her well-being, and she's kind of grown up with a crush on him, but obviously he's a few years older. It didn't really work out, but he did protect her, and basically as she grows older, it's kind of like when their love combines, but then something tragic happened and they are split, and she's now like engaged to his brother, and that's how the story starts. And then it's kind of like all the drama that ensues, and who is she gonna end up with, and why did he break up with her in the first place when clearly he's still in love with her. This is like a multi-perspective narrative. There's the perspective of Dixie, there's this perspective of Asher and a few of his brothers in this book, and I really enjoyed it. This is not life-changing, but for the entertainment itself, I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. We then have a graphic novel, and that is Fence Volume 2 by a multitude of authors, including C.S. Picat and Joanna the Mad. This is a graphic novel series about a boy named Nicholas, and he is trying to get into the fencing team at college because basically he's relying on this scholarship. And this one was not as good as the first one, in my opinion. The first volume was more kind of like introducing you to the world and the stakes that were very high, and Nicholas's sworn fencing enemy, and this one kind of just like was the tryouts, but nothing really happens. And a lot of people pitched this as a male-male romance, but it's been 2 volumes and there is no sight of a male-male romance. It's just hatred at this point, so I don't know how many volumes it's gonna take for it to even show like a slight interest. I don't know if it's gonna be all of a sudden, but this for now is not a romance between Nicholas and his sworn enemy. There are some LGBTQ elements in here. I believe one of the other boys is gay. I did give this like 4 stars because it's still like my favorite graphic novel series, and the graphic illustrations themselves are very nice, but it just, I don't know, like I was expecting more of this graphic novel. And now for my 2 favorite reads. They are for sure going to be my favorite reads of the year. I had a hard time picking between what was my favorite and second favorite, but basically, The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren would be my second favorite. I still gave it 5 out of 5 stars and loved every second of this. I am so happy I own a copy of this and that it's this gorgeous. This was my favorite, this was my first Christina Lauren book from the co-authored ladies here, and this is an adult romance. Again, gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I love this. This follows our main character, Olive, and basically Olive has always been unlucky, whereas her sister has always been very lucky. Her sister won practically everything for the wedding she is hosting, and Olive goes to the wedding, but she doesn't eat seafood, and everybody else except the groom's brother get like food poisoning because of the seafood. And one of the things her sister had won from the wedding was this huge honeymoon to Hawaii, and so Olive and the groom's brother go on this honeymoon together, but they hate each other at first, and it's a hate to love romance. I loved everything about it. This was quirky, this was funny, this was steamy. You were like anticipating when they were going to fall in love with each other, and I loved every second of it. I loved the mentions of Hawaii in here because the honeymoon is in Hawaii, and all the adventures they're going on, and there's kind of like a fake dating trope in here as well. I just think everything about this book was like the perfect adult romance, and what made me go on like an adult romance binge. That's all I'm reading now, and it's all because of this book. So if you guys want a good place to start with Christina Lauren, I suggest this one because I think it was a great introduction for me. If you guys are looking for an introduction to adult romances, you've got this. And the last book I want to talk about, and probably a book I want to make an entire review on, because this book impacted me in a lot more ways than I thought was possible for young adult contemporary. That book is Small Town Hearts by Lily Vale. This is her debut novel, and I must admit that this is going to be a book I'm going to cherish for the rest of my life, which is so funny to say because this book isn't life-changing, the writing style isn't life-changing. Like, this novel and this story has been seen before, but for me it really packed a punch because I can relate to a lot of these things. This follows our main character named Babe, which is short for Barbara, and she lives in the coastal town of Maine. She is working in this cafe and she doesn't really know what she's going to do with her life. Right now college isn't in the cards for her, and she is fine with it. She loves her town and she loves the memories she's making in there, and she wants one last summer with her two best friends, a boy and a girl, and that's all she wants for now. That's all she's going to think about, and life is going to come as it comes. But basically this story takes a lot of different twists and turns. Babe, for one, is bisexual, and her last relationship was with a female named Elodie, and she left town and she left Babe behind, and it took a lot for Babe to grow out of that relationship and be fine with it. And that summer her ex-girlfriend comes back, and she also meets a boy, which is probably one of my favorite boys in YA history. Why am I blanking on his name? He's called Levi, which is so cute. And they start hanging out as friends, and he's kind of like a supporter when everything in Babe's life goes wrong. It's a lot of a coming of age story, which I really appreciated. I appreciated the journey and the understanding of this character. I think it was very deep for a YA contemporary book, and maybe it's because I'm going through a lot of different things where I'm in a stage in my life where I need to find out where I want to be and what I want to become, and it is scary. And I think that this book reflected my inner thoughts and my anxieties at growing up and what change can mean to you and how everybody copes with change differently. And it also reminds me of one of my favorite books when I was a child, which was The Summers of First and Last by Tara Ellen McVoy. This kind of replaces it as a like more grown-up version of it for me, in the sense that our main character has this very deep attachment to her town and the memories she's created, but she also talks about what it means to like live in a small town and have everybody know you, and the feeling of the beach and her favorite local places. And it's really funny because ever since I've been a young child, I've gone to the same campground every year, and for me it's like the most important tradition in my life. If I don't go there at least once in the summer, I don't know what I do. I've grown up there and I have a lot of memories attached to it. Like, I'll smell something that reminds me of it and I'm instantly happier. So Babe's connection to her town is very similar to all of her favorite places, and I just think that her character was so relatable, and this story was so beautiful, and the descriptions in here made me want to cry because I just feel like this was so real, and the emotions portrayed in here were so realistic, and so many of the dilemmas in here and the growing up that's done in this book is something we've all gone through at a certain extent, and we are still going through in my case. So I just think this book was like here at the right time, and I just think everything was so well done. I loved the insecurities of our main character. I love the boy main interest. He is an artist, and he's also trying to find his voice and wanting to know if being an artist is what he wants for his life or he wants to try something else. He has parents that are very vocal about the choices he should make, and again, it's relatable in a sense for a lot of teenagers, and I think it was just great to see a lot of self-searching and discovering yourself and taking chances in this book, and I just loved everything about it. There's descriptions of unhealthy friendships and healthy friendships, and sometimes knowing where you need to stop yourself before it becomes unhealthy. And anyways, I'm gonna stop blabbering on. There will be a full review for this book very, very soon. It might even be up before this video, but I just want to say that you guys should really pick it up. I loved the inclusion of our bisexual main character, and there's also talk about a lesbian main character who is afraid to come out and say that she's lesbian, so there's a lot of talk about finding your sexuality as well. And yeah, So that's it for my wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what book you've read recently that you like the best, or a book you think I should read, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!